Good morning. What's that?
I said, I'm not ready. I'm
Uh-oh.
not ready to answer this question.
Okay. So, we are talking about Bill Clinton today. Everybody get a chance to do the readings. Are there any questions over the readings?
I have maybe one.
Okay.
So about his foreign policy, because it doesn't go in depth about it.
Okay.
The only thing I come up with is that he was trying to expand U.S. business
Oh, okay.
internationally. Is that right?
He did a lot of trying to get people to work together, and so you see the in Ireland and England, he gets them together. You see Israel and the PLO trying to get together. So he spends a lot of time trying to resolve problems.
Didn't he also try to resolve the issue with the Somali Civil War?
Yes, we go into Somalia, so we'll try to walk through that. But any other questions? All right, everybody ready to go? All right, you getting there?
No. Can I just send you a question?
All right, you guys ready? All right. So, what is the answer? What was the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act?
And the state welfare that the government put out to give people opportunities to be employed. I think there was like a 5-year limit that they had. It was to help people that were suffering from unemployment and like poverty to get them the opportunities to have jobs.
Okay, so it's a welfare reform program that is trying to help people move from welfare to finding jobs, finding opportunities, training, education. There is a 5-year limit to federal welfare. They move other benefits to the states. And at that time, if you were receiving benefits, then you had to, I believe it was 3 jobs that you had to apply for each month to show that you were attempting to find work. Is it successful? Okay. And on this, you can argue either direction. Yes, it was successful because many people came off of the welfare program and were able to get jobs and do better. Other people say no because it forced people off of welfare and they don't think that they should be. So, all right. So let's talk about Bill Clinton. When we left last time, when we finished class last time, Bill Clinton had just got elected, right? Who was our previous president? George H.W. Bush. Anybody know who the next president is? George W. Bush. So he is bounded on either side by the Bush family. He enters office with a Democratic Congress. So again, as we have seen before, you have the entire party move in.
Isn't his wife a Democrat?
His wife? Yes, is Hillary Clinton. Yes. And so they start moving on some areas that the Democrats are really wanting to push. They passed the Family and Medical Leave Act, which gives you 12 weeks of unpaid medical leave if you have a child. So remember when we were talking about women and what the women were wanting and the women's revolution back in the 60s, this is when you start to see, all right, you get unpaid leave. You're not getting paid leave necessarily. Your boss can do that, but you get to have time off to take care of your child. Don't ask, don't tell. What is don't ask, don't tell about?
Homosexuals in the military.
Okay, it's homosexuals in the military. Prior to Bill Clinton, what is the rule on homosexuals in the military? They are not allowed in the military. As I said, up through the 70s, the 60s, homosexuality was considered a mental disease. And so the military said it is not conducive to being in the military. And when you throw loads and loads of people into the same showers at the same time, they just said that too much concern. So the Democrats said, we will change this. We will allow gays to be in the military. When Bill Clinton became president, he started speaking to the generals, he started speaking to other people, and they said, look, here are the concerns. We're not quite ready for this. So he implemented don't ask, don't tell. Don't ask, don't tell means if you are in the military and you are gay, as long as you didn't tell anybody, then you are fine. No one was going to kick you out. Conversely, if I am in the military and I believe you are gay, I am not allowed to ask you. I am not allowed to put you in a position where you have to say that you are gay and then kick you out from that statement. So this is step one of opening the military to homosexuals. All right, the Violence Against Women Act. The Violence Against Women Act is designed to ensure that domestic violence is reduced. Now it says violence against women. It also covers men. It covers married couples. It covers dating couples. It covers people who are living together. And it's intended to ensure that one partner is not abusive and harmful to the other one. And it allows people to arrest a partner even if the other partner doesn't necessarily want that. But the intent is to ensure that people can live safely with each other. All right, so they push several things through and they're doing pretty well until they hit healthcare. They work on the Healthcare Reform Act, and this is where Bill Clinton actually hands the Healthcare Reform Act to his wife, Hillary. This is very unusual. Usually, what do presidents' wives do?
Look pretty.
Well, they usually have like a goal.
Lunches.
Yeah, preschool lunches, don't do drugs. You know, they have a focus, but it's a I just want to influence focus. They don't actually get involved in setting up laws. Why is Hillary Clinton different?
She was already in the political aspect of everything.
All right, she is already a political player. She is a lawyer, and she wants to be in politics. She wants to have power. She wants to have the authority. And so Bill says, here, you can run this. This is your baby. And so she starts pushing the universal health care. This would ensure that everybody had medical care across the U.S. Now, the weird part is, if you have a medical emergency, everyone in the U.S. has medical care, right? If you go to the emergency room, they are required to take care of you, whether you have insurance or not. And this was true 50 years ago, true now. But this will ensure that everyone has an insurance policy that is covered. And so this is an area where, what do people have against this?
Money has to come from somewhere.
Okay, somebody has to pay for it, and it's really expensive to have insurance. That's why most people do their insurance through their company, because if you have loads of people together, it reduces the cost of insurance. So if you have everyone in the US is going to have insurance, somebody has to pay for that insurance. And so now there's an argument over, well, who's paying for this? And, you know, if people don't want to pay for it, are they going to be required to have it? The other big issue is, do you pay for abortions? Are abortions health care? Are they murder? And that is a huge ethical dilemma that you have to decide, right? If you're going to put together a package. Hillary Clinton decides that she is going to support payment for abortions. As soon as she does this, the entire Republican Party, and I shouldn't say entire, but the majority of the Republican Party and many of the Southern Democrats now say, no, we are not going to support this. So Healthcare Reform Act actually fails. Some people said, hey, Mrs. Clinton, why don't you go ahead and let's coordinate, let's figure out, can we come up with a compromised position? And she said, no, we're not going to compromise. This is the way it's going to be. And if you don't accept it, then we're just going to push it through. This is what cost it finally to not go through, is the fact that she, sort of like Wilson, refused to compromise on this. And so they said, well, then we're not playing either. In 1994, the midterm elections, you know, this time everybody was talking about, hey, there will be a red wave. But there actually was a move to conservatives. The Republicans took many positions in the House and the Senate. This happens a lot. And so now Clinton looks at it, and he is a pretty pragmatic guy. And he says, you know what? American people have spoken. if they want us to be more conservative, then I will move closer to the center. And you start to see his policies and the things that he does domestically start being more conservative. So the Violent Crime and Control and Law Enforcement Act. This is called the Three Strikes Act. Anybody ever hear of the Three Strikes Act? What they said is if you commit a crime, you go to jail. But if you commit a second crime, then it's a larger sentence. And if you commit a crime 3 times, then you are obviously someone who is not going to be corrected by short jail time. So they will expand your jail time really considerably. And so this is where now you have a lot of people who are frustrated and say, well, there are people in jail for drug possession, but their drug possession sentence was longer than a murder sentence. And the answer is yes, because that was their 3rd drug possession sentence or their 3rd criminal offense. And so the judicial system is saying, wait a minute, why are you continually breaking the law? So this was intended to reduce recidivism, the chances of criminals going back into crime again. And, you know, again, some people say it works well, some people do not say it works well. The Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Responsibility Act. This, again, is trying to help people get off of federal assistance. So if you're on federal assistance, there's a 5-year federal limit. They move other help to the states. And if you are working to get a job, you have to turn in, hey, these are the 3 jobs that I applied for, or hey, I went into training and I am learning how to do this job, which will make me more marketable. And again, some people really loved this, some people really hated it. It did get many people from welfare into the employment. So there were some positives. The other thing, though, is foreign policy. When Clinton comes in, is his goal to deal with foreign policy? No. Bill Clinton was like, I want to deal with domestic issues. I want to make sure that life is better for people here in the U.S. So it's sort of like Johnson. Johnson did not want to deal with foreign policy. Clinton wanted to focus on domestic issues. Whenever you have a president that wants to focus on domestic issues, almost always you will see foreign policy issues. And you see the same thing with Biden now, right? So what does he do with foreign policy issues? Anybody ever hear of Black Hawk Down? What's? It is a movie. It's a really good movie. It's a really sad movie. All right. So the U.S. should not, I mean, is Somalia a big issue for the U.S. normally? No. But there was, the Somalis overthrew their government. The replacement governments never really worked, and it kind of devolved into a intertribal civil war. So you had the different tribes and the different clans who started fighting each other. Because of that, they started to have a famine. This was made worse by a drought. And so loads and loads of people are starting to die in Somalia. All those, I don't know if your mom ever tells you, but you know, when you're growing up, your mom would be like, eat your peas. There's starving kids in Africa. I think that's kind of where this came from. Probably actually isn't, because that probably started back in the 40s or something. But you know, you have these pictures on TV with these starving little kids, and they're like, we just need to get food to them, right? And so how do you get food to them? The UN started bringing food shipments into Somalia and started handing food out to people. And that's a good thing, right?
You would think so.
Yeah. Except that the warlords, all these clan warlords, discovered, wait a minute, what is the most valuable thing in Somalia at this point? And it's food. So if I can gain control of the food, then I can use the food to hire soldiers. I can use the food to take care of my people and make them more responsive to me, make them more focused on how do they help me out. And so then I can sell the excess to other people and gain what I need from that food. So you had these warlords who would go into the UN shipments, drive up in a modified pickup that had machine guns on the top, and say, we're going to take this food. Now, if you're a UN worker, what do you do?
Well, if they're coming at you with weapons, I would assume you just give it to them.
You give them the food because you don't want to die. Meanwhile, all these other people are still starving to death. And so this goes on, and it goes on TV, and everybody's like, okay, we have to stop this. So the only way to stop people with guns is other people with guns, right? So President Bush says we are going to send in guys with guns, and we're going to protect the food shipments and make sure that they go to the people that they are supposed to go to. They do, and everything starts calming down, so we start to remove the people with guns. What happens again? All the warlords start to come in and steal the food again, and they actually attack the UN people again. So Bill Clinton is now the president. He says, you know what? The worst offender of this is a guy named Mohammed Farah Aidid. He is in Mogadishu. He controls Mogadishu. And he says, what we need to do is go in and take out Aidid. So he sends in U.S. Special Forces guys, Rangers, some Navy SEALs, and he says, what I want you guys to do is go arrest Aidid. Now, there's one problem with this. When you go into Somalia, who's supportive of the U.S.? Nobody. If you think about this, what you're trying to do is send a group of outsiders into a city that is controlled and taken care of by the guy you're trying to take out, right? So this would be like going into a gang area and saying, I'm going to take out the president of the gang. Everybody in that gang is like, nope, you're not. And if that gang has control of the area well enough, then everybody in that neighborhood knows that if they want to survive this day, they're going to help the gang, not the outsiders. And so that's what happens. When the guys start coming into Mogadishu, they're an hour out, and people already know where they're at, where they're driving, how fast they're driving, when they're going to get to Mogadishu. And so as they drive into Mogadishu, everybody is kind of ready for them. They drive up to the area, and there are guys who are ready around all the corners, and they actually start shooting both at the men and the helicopters that are flying in to oversee what's going on. They managed to shoot down a helicopter. And this is shocking to the U.S. because we're just like, okay, these are a bunch of Africans. This is not going to be a big fight. But it winds up, these guys have been fighting most of their lives. And they go, yeah, we can do this. When they shoot down the helicopter, they go to take over the helicopter. And the U.S. forces try to protect the helicopter. During this time, they shoot down a second helicopter. And so now the U.S. is engaged in trying to protect both helicopters. They have gone in and tried to take Aidid. Aidid is not there, or he has escaped, but they capture other guys. So they send the guys they capture in an armored vehicle, and they're like, hey, you need to get out of here. And so they go ahead and they start driving out. By this time, every person in Somalia who owns a gun or borrows a gun is shooting at them. So they actually don't make the truck out of Mogadishu without even some of the guys that they have just arrested being killed by hostile fire. In addition, all the guys that were supposed to leave with them, there wasn't room because of the number of wounded and the people that they're trying to take care of, the helicopters. So now you have all these military, U.S. military personnel who are stuck in Somalia. They wind up fighting and they stay overnight. The next day, there's a huge group of people that comes in and helps them pull out. In the meantime, though, they've lost numerous folks. The Somalis have grabbed, I don't know if you can see this picture, but they have taken the pilots and the crews from the helicopters, and they desecrate their bodies and they drag them through the streets, and all of this is on the news. And so everybody in America is like, why did we let this happen? At this point, Bill Clinton says, instead of fighting the Somalis, instead of trying to, say, hey, no, you're not going to treat the people like this. We're going to take control and we're going to settle things down. He says, you know what? We just need to get out. So he pulls out of Somalia. At this point, Bill Clinton decides we should never have U.S. forces on the ground again. It's just too scary. There's too great a chance for U.S. people to be harmed. There's too great a chance for there to be TV scenes with U.S. soldiers, U.S. airmen getting dragged around and harmed. So this is one of the defining moments of his administration is how do you respond to other military emergencies. Second thing comes up when the Haitian president is overthrown. Raoul Cedras is the general in Haiti. When a new Haitian president is elected, he starts to ease things, and he knows that the military has been used against the people, so he tries to take power away from the military. Now, in many governments where the military has a lot of power and authority, when you try to take a power away from the military, what's going to happen? All right, they overthrow Aristide, and they're like, we'll take control, thank you very much. President Clinton says, we can't have that. Haiti is in the Americas, and we want to make sure that democratic governments are covered. So this one is really kind of interesting because it kind of flips Somalia on its head. Somalia is a worst case scenario where the U.S. is driven out, they're embarrassed, and they are hurt. In Haiti, we roll in and we say, hey, Cedras, we want to talk. Let's talk about why you don't want to do this. Cedras comes up to New York and he meets with Aristide, and we think everything's resolved. So we send a ship down to kind of set everything up. And as the ship starts to pull into the port, a bunch of Haitians start to shoot at it. And they're like, hey, the Somalians drove you guys out. We can do the same thing. We don't have a lot of military personnel on the ship, so the ship pulls back out of port. And we're like, okay, now we got to kind of step back and figure out what to do. This time, they grab I believe it's the 10th Mountain Division. It's the guys who are ready to go to war. But before they get in, former President Carter, Sam Nunn, who is a congressman, and Colin Powell are asked to go down and talk to Cedras. Colin Powell actually has some relationship with him. Carter has been in Haiti before. So they all three kind of have a relationship down there. Now, why would you have those three people? Anybody know, what is Jimmy Carter known for? Peace talks. Jimmy Carter does a lot of stuff to try to resolve things. He also helps out with elections to make sure that elections are valid. So he will send groups of people down to be like, yeah, we're going to monitor the election. He had actually been in Haiti to monitor the election, and he said, yeah, Aristide was elected fairly. So he is a former president. He's very powerful. He's well known. So he goes down. Sam Nunn is on the Senate Military Money Committee. So he has a lot of authority. He has a lot of power with the U.S. military. So they send him down to say, hey, just so we're clear, Carter's down here because he's a really nice guy. Sam Nunn's down here because he can make things happen. And then Colin Powell. Who's Colin Powell?
Head of the Army?
He was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And so he is going down. He actually had met Cedras and knew him a little bit. Long story short, the three go down there and they say, hey, we have a deal for you. We'd really like for you to just leave Haiti, let Aristide back in charge. Now, if that's the only deal, what do you think the response is going to be? No. But they say, all right, so we have this nice briefcase full of money, and we will give you this briefcase full of money if you just leave and let Aristide come in. He's like, okay. And what if I don't? And they pull up a laptop and they say, we want to show you a video. And they show him a video, and it's all of the U.S. Rangers rolling onto a plane, right? And they said, do you know who this is? And he goes, well, yeah, I actually do. This is the U.S. military, some of the toughest guys in the military. And they're like, yes. Last question. Do you know when this video was taken? And he goes, well, I presume that this is a current video. And they said, well, actually, no. This video was taken a few hours ago. The plane is already on its way here. So do you want to take the briefcase, or do you want to wait till they come in and kill you? And he said, briefcase number 1, I'll go ahead and leave. So he actually leaves. Aristide is restored to power. And this goes from being the most horrible part of the the Clinton foreign policy to one of the greatest successes because we were able to restore Aristide into Haiti without bloodshed. The U.S. military does come in. They kind of help the military to calm down, find different things to do with themselves. But there's never a conflict because we just go in and we take over. All right, he passes NAFTA. Has anybody ever heard of NAFTA? North American Free Trade Agreement. And that is an agreement between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico that trucks, commercial trucks can move back and forth easily. And we're going to go ahead and improve our trade between the three nations. He gets the Oslo Accords passed. This is a big deal because Israel and Palestine. I'm sure you guys have heard of Israel and Palestine, right? Do they love each other? No. In fact, they have been fighting each other since Israel existed. So he sits down and he goes, look, we need to make a deal. We need to get everybody calming down. How about Israel? You need to recognize the Palestinian Authority. You need to recognize that they have political authority and they can help you make decisions. Conversely, the PLO has to recognize Israel, and you guys have to say you're going to stop conducting terror attacks on the Israelis. And they actually sit down, they do agree to it. So for a while, everything is calmed down. And in fact, it's calmed down for a little while that there's not incredible numbers of terrorist attacks. The Israelis are not causing problems for the Palestinians. So again, this is kind of a positive move. He then moves to Northern Ireland, where the Irish and the English have been bombing each other. I don't know, you guys may have heard U2, Bloody Sunday. And it's about Britain attacking the Irish and the Irish. So the Irish are deemed Catholics and the British are Protestants, but it's really more about control and do the Irish fall under the English king. And so this has been a big issue. When they separated, Ireland was given its own authority, but Northern Ireland was retained by England, and the Irish are like, nope, we need to go ahead and we will control Northern Ireland. So they conduct terrorist acts into Ireland and into England to kind of force that issue. The Clinton administration comes in and says, all right, what happens if Northern Ireland gets the chance to vote and say, do they belong to Ireland? Do they stick with England? And everybody's like, okay, if they can vote, that'll be fine. They conduct the vote, and Ireland says, you know what? Northern Ireland would like to retain our ties with England. And so everybody's all right. Can we just calm down now? Dayton Peace Accords. The Serbs are going in and conducting genocide against the Bosnians and Kosovars. Interestingly enough, the Bosnians and Kosovars had been conducting genocide against the Serbs in World War II and before. So this is an area where everybody just hates everybody. It's like the Hatfields and McCoys. It's like, well, your great-great-great-grandfather hurt my great-great-great-grandfather, so now I have to kill you. How do you resolve that? I don't have a really good answer either. The problem that the Clinton administration has, based on Somalia, does he want to put ground troops in there? No. So what he does is say, we're going to win this war with air. And so he starts bombing the Serbs anytime that the Serbs do anything bad to the Kosovars or to the Bosnians. The problem with that is that the Bosnians and the Kosovars actually start realizing what's happening. So they start blowing up themselves, blowing up their own people, and blaming it on the Serbs so that the Serbs will, or the U.S. will conduct air attacks against the Serbs. After the Serbs have pretty much done what they wanted to do, then they go to the table and say, yes, we're willing to surrender and we're good. And so they sign the accords. This is kind of a partial win, partial loss, because since we refused to put people on the ground, the Serbians were able to accomplish much of what they wanted to do, and we really didn't stop them until Russia basically refused to support them anymore. And so that is kind of a middle ground. He does establish trade agreements with China, and he supports the expansion of NATO. So what's the goal of NATO? Okay, to stop Russia. The problem is there a Soviet Union anymore? No. So why does NATO exist?
It's to help countries like Iceland.
Okay. But again, what's the goal? To protect people from the Soviet Union. Soviet Union doesn't exist. Why does NATO need to exist?
That's a great question.
Well,
Still help, like, because Russia is still really, really big.
okay, because there are still many countries that were controlled by Russia for 50 years who are like, we didn't want this, we don't want to go back to that. So they're saying, hey, we used to be part of the Soviet Union, but now we want to be part of NATO and we want you to protect us. So what do you see now? Why did Russia go into Ukraine? Ukraine was asking to be part of NATO, and Russia was like, nope, you're not going to be part of NATO. So they started attacking into Ukraine.
But were they? Ukraine wasn't.
It was not part of NATO yet. They had asked to be,
Yeah.
but it had not been moved forward yet. The other thing that's kind of scary right now is Poland is part of NATO, right? And if you remember, Poland was forcibly made part of the Soviet Pact, the Soviet military organization of Eastern Europe. And they're like, we didn't want to be part of that, so they joined NATO. Now, NATO says an attack on one is an attack on all, right? Russia just launched rockets into Poland.
Yesterday.
Yes, yesterday. Is that an attack on NATO?
Kind of.
Yeah. So now we have to determine, are we actually going to use NATO and defend and possibly get into a war with Russia, or are we not?
Do they have a choice?
Well, legally they should not have a choice.
Yeah.
Because NATO says an attack on one is an attack on all.
Exactly.
Therefore, it should be. But Russia's saying, well, it was an accident, and
Well, that doesn't matter.
yeah. Well, we will see what
Aren't
happens.
there people on the border right now, like other militaries?
Yes.
Okay.
So we will see what happens. This will be something that determines how NATO is perceived and how do we respond.
Countries are part of NATO.
There's 31 countries.
Yeah. So I'll have to get with you after class because I don't have.
I don't like we can't. My country can't help anybody to do anything.
That's not true.
What can we do? We don't have a military.
But you have bases, you have areas that people can stage from. So
Yeah, we have a military base, yes, but we don't have anything else.
yeah. So
We don't even have space for the people to come to us.
okay.
No, They're sending people back, which is pretty awful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'll have to check into that. So you have a whole lot of foreign policy things going on, right? When the next election comes up, how do people feel about Bill Clinton?
So.
Yeah, I mean, some people are still pretty positive. Some people are like, you've done some things that we're not happy with. So this time, instead of campaigning and saying, hey, look, I'm going to change a lot of things, he campaigns as a centrist and he says, look, are you better off than you were before? Sort of like Reagan said. He says, are you doing okay? The Republicans grab a guy named Bob Dole. Why do you think they would grab Bob Dole? Bob Dole is this old guy from Kansas. He's been a senator forever. When McCain died, I don't know if you guys remember that, but there was an old guy and he came up and he walks really slowly and he saluted with his left hand, which is really unusual. That was Bob Dole. And the reason Bob Dole salutes with his left hand is because he was wounded and his right arm doesn't work anymore. So the comparison that the Republicans are trying to make is, here's a war hero versus a guy who refused to fight in Vietnam and dodged the draft. And so they think that the American people will say, yeah, we want the war hero. Ross Perot comes in, and this time he campaigns under the Reform Party. He has the same goals. He has the same objectives. We need to cut spending. We need to reduce the debt. And at the end of the day, Clinton wins 49% of the vote. Dole wins 40%, and Perot takes 9%. Clinton becomes the first president since Franklin Roosevelt, to win a second term in office. So, sadly, what happens when you get a second term in office? Corruption. So, when Bill Clinton was running the first time, you remember I talked to you about a woman named Paula Jones that said that he had sexually harassed her. There were other women who said this. In the meantime, they start investigations into some financial concerns. Hillary Clinton has put in some investments. She put $1,000 in against cattle futures, and in 1 year made $100,000 with that $1,000. Now, if anybody here has that kind of deal, I'd really like to talk to you, right? That's shocking. That does not happen very often. So they start looking into it, and then they discover that the company actually loaned her the $1,000. So what does that tell you? How much did she put in?
1,000.
Zero, because they loaned her the $1,000. And then the $1,000 made $100,000. Now that is the deal I want. I put no investment in, and you give me $100,000 at the end of the year.
And you don't have, and you just have to pay up the loan, which will probably be 2,000.
Yeah, I just pay back the loan. So I'll pay you $1,000 plus maybe some interest. So I wound up with $98,900 and whatever dollars, right? That's a pretty good investment. Is it illegal? And they go through, and what they find is it's probably highly unethical. It almost certainly had to do with political favors, but there was nothing illegal that happened. People are able to loan you money to put into an investment and then give you the money from that investment. So it's just really concerning and questionable. And then there's a group, they called it Whitewater. And a couple called the McDougalls convinced the Clintons to join them, and they buy a swamp. And they put really nice houses in the swamp area, and they sell them so that people will spend a whole lot of money on these houses, except that it's a swamp. So they wind up losing loads and loads of money. Somehow, instead of the investors losing money, the banks decide to take all the losses. Again, it's like, that doesn't happen that often. What is going on? And so as they investigate, 15 people wind up going to jail for fraud. Mr. McDougal is the president of the bank that has lost all the money. They wind up going to jail. But at the end of the day, the Clintons basically are not involved, even though they were part of the investment, even though they were making the money off of it. There is no official legal ties that show they did anything illegal. So now there's a lot more. All right, it looks like there's stuff going on, right? It looks like even though they haven't found anything, all this stuff is kind of questionable, and they're like, all right, then we need to figure out what is going on. In the meantime, Paula Jones continues her sexual harassment suit against Clinton. In the investigation, someone calls from the Pentagon and they say, hey, there's this intern that came over and she's bragging about having a sexual relationship with Clinton. Now, I will just ask you guys. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. So when they are going into the trial, Clinton is brought in, and he said, they say, have you had a relationship with Paula Jones? No, she's lying. And they say, okay, there is a claim that you've had relationships with these other women, including this young intern, Lewinsky, Monica Lewinsky. And he says, I did not have a relationship with Monica Lewinsky, under oath. Then they call her in, and she says, I did not have a relationship with Bill Clinton, under oath. So at this point, they move on, but there's further investigation because they believe that there's evidence that he did have a relationship with Monica Lewinsky. If he had a relationship with Monica Lewinsky, then he just lied under oath. So basically, a lot of stuff comes out. At the end of the day, there is a blue dress that is found that is Monica Lewinsky's, and it has semen from Bill Clinton on it. So That may not be an absolute guarantee, but that tells you that something did happen, right? And so at this point, now everybody is like, okay, we have to figure out what happened. The Starr report comes back and it says there are 11 grounds for impeaching President Clinton. It goes to the Judiciary Committee and they recommend that Clinton be impeached for lying to a grand jury, perjury, obstructing justice, because what is found out once Monica Lewinsky is found out to have lied under oath, she says, I was told to lie under oath. I was told to get rid of all the gifts that Bill Clinton gave me. I was told to burn anything that would, show the proof of what happened. And so they say, okay, that's obstruction of justice, and then abuse of power, because he's the president and she's an intern, right? And he is abusing his power. So the House impeaches him for perjury, obstruction for justice, but the Senate acquits him on all charges. Now, let's walk back. We've had the Me Too movement, right? So I want to know, what are your thoughts on Bill Clinton having a relationship with Monica Lewinsky? When we were going through this, some people say, not anybody's business if a guy has an affair. Other people say, you have a president in the Oval Office having an affair with someone who is his direct subordinate. So, how would you respond? Should we divide up the room, or you guys just want to talk to me? We can just talk, but I got to hear some stuff.
I mean, you couldn't do that in like the workplace. Like anyways, like your boss couldn't.
Okay, so yeah, and I'm not trying to get in anybody's business, but if President Rice was to have a relationship with a student, is that appropriate? No. And he would probably be fired, right? All right.
Well, it depends, because here you can be a specific age. Like,
Yes.
you can be his age or whatever, or maybe not, but like you can still be like 30 something.
Yes. So the relationship would not be like, wow, I just lost the name. But it's not a rape because, yeah, if you're over 18, then you can agree to the relationship. But
said it though, it's an abuse of power.
okay,
Yeah.
the problem is, yes, if it's a student and the president of the university, then he has authority over your life, right?
And he can do anything. He'd be like, well, you don't get in a relationship with me, you won't be able to pass this class. Or
Right.
I won't let you graduate from this school, won't let you go to another school because I won't let your transcripts be sent out. So, I mean, if you look at it that way, it could be seen the same way as, oh, I'm the president of the United States. If you don't do this, I can have this, and happen. Like, he has control over military, has control over he has like people that he can go to be like, oh, I want you to get information, like produce something that's dirty about this woman because she did something.
Right. And so she's an intern. Her goal is to do well in politics. He can do really good things for her in a future career, or he can really harm her badly, right? And so,
Seen it as a
oh yeah.
for her own.
I mean, realistically, for an intern to have a relationship with the president, now she has the president who can make phone calls and say, hey, give her a job here, give her a job here.
I wish she started to talk about it more now. She's like, she's using it for a political standpoint.
Yes, I mean, she's starting to talk about it now. It was horribly embarrassing for her to have to come out and say, yes, I had a relationship with this guy who was married. But for a long time, in fact, there were key women in the women's rights movements who said, well, Monica Lewinsky should just shut up. You know, it's their business if they want to have a relationship. Hillary Clinton said, you know, this is a personal family thing. It's not political.
President of the United States.
Yeah, well, and that's the piece that's interesting is you do have this very, very
It's it's a thin balance between what
It's
is
just like when a
yours and
celebrity
what
gets
other
mad.
people know.
About people getting in their business, like,
Okay.
you're a celebrity, like, you
Yeah.
put yourself in that position, so you made your life public at that point, and he took a public office, I mean, it's,
Yeah, and he is in a public office, and so it does become everybody's business, especially, some people said that the impeachment was over him having an inappropriate relationship. Now, I will tell you, right before this, I was still in the military. There was a colonel that had a young woman working for him. She was I think she was a junior captain or a young lieutenant, but pretty new in the military. They were working together one night. From what the trial transcript said, he yelled at her over something. She started to cry, and so he came around his desk, hugged her, and kissed her on the forehead. I think. He kissed her, I should just say. That's all I know for sure. Now, anybody want to guess what happened to him?
You got fired.
He actually went to prison. He got court-martialed because it was an inappropriate relationship. It was forcing himself on a person who is junior to him in rank. And so I will tell you that was the most shocking thing that I remember in my career, is watching this full colonel that I had known walk out of the trial. As he steps out of the door, two guys grabbed him and pull his Colonel Birds off of his uniform, and he goes from being an 06 to an E1, 0, no power, no authority, and then shackling him, and he gets taken to Fort Leavenworth. I'm like, wow, okay, that's some pretty big stuff. And then I see what happens with Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, and I was really upset because I was like, wait a minute, this guy just went to jail and the president was just told it's okay. But this is, again, are impeachments about innocence or guilt? No, it's about political power. It's about who wants things to happen or who doesn't want things to happen. All right. But yeah, now people are looking back on this. It is interesting to see some changes after the Me Too movement, but it's also amazing to me to see how things just kind of pulled back into, hey, it really doesn't matter. It all depends on where you stand politically and if people like you.
But is it possible that especially the president here, has too much power?
Well, and that's the concern. The president is supposed to be held under control by Congress and by the Supreme Court. And so, yeah, it's supposed to be everybody kind of holding the other one back. But if Congress decides, hey, it's not a big deal, then they can afford to do that.
Because I feel like I don't know. Especially the ones that, like, I really don't care about American politics at all. Like,
Yes.
This is, but like, I don't know. I feel like the majority of all these presidents, like, abuse their power, like the word that we've been using here. Because they can, like, destroy everything, while the president, like, in my country, he doesn't have any power, or he has, but he just has to sign the papers.
Yeah.
He doesn't control anything except his handwriting controls, okay, I agree to this.
And I think the U.S. was more like that, but the president has taken on more authority over the years. And as long as
the public is agreeing to that?
as long as Congress and the public and the Supreme Court let it happen, then it is what it is. But yeah, it is something that people are concerned about and people talk about. And it's something that voters should be thinking about. How much power should the president have? How much power should the president be allowed to use in executive orders? And so you guys saw President Biden did the, what was it called? For college loans, he was saying that you're going to get $10,000 to $20,000 back. And now the courts have said, no, that is a congressional thing that Congress says where money goes. So there are times when the president is held accountable and told, no, this is beyond what you can do. But the Supreme Court and the Congress have to be the ones that determine how far he is allowed to go or she is allowed to go. All right. So after all this happens, President Clinton has been impeached, but he has not been removed from office. Can he run again? No. Why? Because he's been impeached? No, because he's already had 2 terms. Yeah. So the Democrats really like Clinton, and they say, you know what, he survived the impeachment, so they go ahead and nominate Al Gore, who is Clinton's vice president. The Republicans nominate George W. Bush, who is the governor of Texas, and George H.W. Bush's son. This becomes a really, really contentious election, and it is, do we want a stronger government who gets involved and changes things for Americans, or do we want a smaller government who will stay out of our business and allow people to do things? It's a very, very tightly contested election. It's really crazy, and this is where I get really frustrated when people call elections early. And so usually you have elections called the same night the election happens, right? How does that occur? Are all the votes counted? No, it's as people come out, they say, hey, this is who I voted for, and they start evaluating and determining, and they're like, okay, well, this person won. In the election of 2000, they actually are calling. They call Florida for Al Gore. And they say Al Gore won Florida. And then they continue to move on. And so it looks like Al Gore is going to win. And all of a sudden, they come back and they go, whoops, there was a mistake. Florida is not going to Al Gore. Florida is actually going to go to George W. Bush.
Why is that always the last state to figure out their, I don't understand it. Why is
Well,
it always a determining factor?
This time, Florida was decided pretty quickly.
It was
Um,
Arizona and Nevada that
yeah.
was like,
Yeah, so you had Arizona, Nevada, and California still has some outstanding stuff. Alaska is still outstanding. But Florida, the reason this was a problem was it was so tight. There were just as many Democrats as Republicans, and so the numbers were really close. If, like, Oklahoma. Oklahoma was pretty clear, pretty quick that it was going to go Republican, right? Because the numbers are overwhelming. Other states, usually, like Massachusetts, is going to be called really quickly because it's almost always going to be Democratic. So it's the ones that are really tight that are, okay, who's going to win? Now, I wish that there would be more times, while it's really frustrating, where they said, you know what, we don't have an answer for you yet. Let's just wait. And I really, really wish that they would not be allowed to call any state until every state has voted. Once every state has completed voting, then if they want to start calling things, then that's fine. But I think personally that when you start calling races over here, it impacts voting over here. And so I can't prove that, but it does frustrate me because, like, okay, why don't we wait and let everybody have a chance to vote, and then once you've had the chance to vote, then you can do it.
Voting. What do you mean by that?
I think that people see how the voting happens over here and starts to see, oh, well, my guy's going to get elected or my guy's not going to have a chance to get elected, and so they go home. Or conversely, oh, my guy has a chance to get elected. I didn't think he would. Now I'm going to go to the polls. I think, why do these guys get to know?
like different times during the day. Like they don't even it out to be like, oh, it's 3 here, so it's like whatever time it is in LA to be match up.
Yeah. So the polls, as soon as the polls close here, you start to see these states called. But there's another 3 to 4 hours before the polls are closed over here, right? So anyway, I want to make sure we get through this before we finish. The weird part is now Bush is given Florida. If Bush is given Florida, he wins the vote. Gore concedes, and then they say, wait a minute. Part of the problem is when people voted, you had a little machine that punches holes. And the machine is supposed to punch the entire hole out, and there's a hole. But sometimes the machine punched and it left a chad, which is the piece that should have fallen out, is still there. So when the machine is reading, did you vote or did you not vote? And other times, they have this little bump because it didn't actually cut it at all. But you can tell what the voter intended to vote, right? So do you count these and do you count these? Or do you just count the ones that there's a solid hole? And so now Gore says, wait a minute. I want to fight over this. I want to see if I won Florida, because the election is so close that if Florida goes to Gore, then Gore wins the presidency. So now the Florida Supreme Court says, all right, we're going to redo this again, and we're going to have a recount, and we're going to see all these punch chads, we're going to see these hanging chads, and we're going to see what everybody wants. But the recount is taking a really, really long time by the time it's gone through the court and by the time everybody's trying to recount, and there's a problem. When it's time for Clinton to leave office, what happens if a new president isn't elected? Nobody knows. You're supposed to have all the elections done, and so there is not an answer. And so the Supreme Court steps in and says, look, a president has been selected based on the information that we had, and therefore George W. Bush is now the president. And so the Supreme Court declares Bush to be the president. A lot of people are really frustrated because they say, wait a minute, there was never a real investigation. But I will tell you, this has happened in the past. Tilden versus Hayes, we had to have the Supreme Court get involved. There were numerous times when the popular vote wasn't the same as the electoral vote. And so it is one of those things where you just say, okay, it is what it is. All right, so we walked through the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act, right? You guys feel pretty comfortable with that? Why was Clinton impeached? Actually, lying under oath, obstructing justice, right? So if you see that again, what I want to see is he was not impeached over Monica Lewinsky. He was impeached over lying under oath, obstructing justice, and abuse of power. Now, I would like you to understand, why did he do those things, right? All right, what are the foreign policy concerns? Somalia and Haiti and Ireland, Kosovo. All these things are places where he is trying to solve internal problems in the nation. Sometimes he's successful and sometimes he's not. But he decides after Somalia not to put U.S. troops in because he thinks it's too dangerous. All right. So I tried to rush through that. We have a little bit more time, but so does everybody understand what happened with the 2000 election? Does that make sense? All right. So when George Bush is elected, and we will go through the Bush administration, there are a lot of people that are very concerned. Did he win the election? So he spends the first part of his administration trying to prove, yes, I'm going to be a fine president. Everybody, just trust me and I got this. All right. Any other questions, concerns? I tried to get out the questions for the final to you guys, but since I don't have access to the computer, I was not able to do that. As soon as I have access, I will get those questions back out to you guys so that you can start studying for the final. All right. Thank you very much. I will talk to you later.